Hey everyone, this is Tiny Writer, also just called Tiny. After his untimely death in Stormwind and his resurrection into the Forsaken, Tiny has chosen to continue his mission from his living life into his life of undeath. Chronicleize the Horde, one zone at a time. Last time we left Tiny, he had just left Deathnell, and he had 2 quests to arrive at Brill. One to speak to the commander there, and the other to reach the inn and find a place of respite. But before we begin, Tiny wanted to break down the zone for everyone. Tirisfal Glades does technically include Deathnell, but outside of the starter zone, there are roughly 50-ish quests, including class quests. Tiny has done the job of completing all quests available to him. To further break this down, there are a handful of one-off quests, but this is where we experience our first real story-driven chain quest lines. They're broken up into these various storylines. The first storyline is the New Plague. The second storyline is At War with the Scarlet Crusade. The third storyline is the Agamand Mills, and the fourth and final storyline is the Prodigal Lich. The other quests we'll go over do have prerequisites and affect the overall area here in Tirisfal, but they don't really have an overarching story. Tiny will be sprinkling in those quests as we go over these main stories. As we follow the road out of Deathnell, we are greeted by yet another Death Guard. Death Guard Simmer is his name, and he asks us the ever-imperative question: do we wish to prove ourselves to the Dark Lady? He tells us of a farm west of our current location that has a human infestation. To make matters worse, it isn't just humans occupying the farm, but Scarlet Crusaders have reinforced the nearby fort as well. Simmer asks us not only to teach these humans a lesson, but also to steal 10 of their precious pumpkins and bring them to a man known as Apothecary Johann in Brill. Going west does deter us from our original path to Brill, but an encroaching human settlement and their extermination seems to be the perfect sidetrack event for us to go on before meeting with the Executor in Brill. So, we begin not only our heist, but the massacre of the humans here. Leaving Deathnell, we believed ourselves to be a bit invincible, but these farmers seem to have gathered quite a bit of strength from toiling in these fields, so we begin to think a bit more before taking on several of them at a time in combat. Their pumpkins, however, ripe, easily picked, and quite plentiful, litter the farm's acreage. Oddly enough, we do ponder how they grow so large with such little sunlight here. With pumpkins in hand, we set out towards Brill. We need to get these pumpkins to the apothecary and don't wish to keep any more people waiting. Well, that is until we meet this. This is Gordo. We discover what the Forsaken call an abomination, a somewhat infantile creature concocted of several corpses stitched together and twisted by undead magic. We had read about them in our previous life, but seeing one up close in person drives the fear of them into our cold, dead heart. And then, he speaks. Gordo says he won't hurt us, but only if we help him. He says that they need gloomweed, and when we have enough, to bring them to Master Holland in Brill. We're not entirely sure what gloomweed looks like, but we're told it's along the roads and by the trees. So, we take a bit of time as we travel to Brill. I mean, it's on the way, right? What's one more errand? And like that, we finally reach Brill, and for a moment, we feel like a living human again. This was a town with a stable, the apothecary's house, a graveyard, an inn, a townhouse, and even traders and blacksmiths. It sort of felt like coming home. As we arrive, we receive a new quest called A Putrid Task from another Death Guard calling himself Dillinger. He flags us down to tell us they could use our assistance, saying the mindless ones have trickled their way into Tirisfal, back the way we had just come by, under this old wooden bridge. He promises us a reward, but we tell him we have important business before pressing forward. In town, we make a few stops to forward our quests. Executor Zygand thanks us for our report from Death Knell and immediately enlists us. Based on the documents we have just brought here, it gives us a handful of opportunities to break through the Scarlet Crusade's forces. However, the Death Guards are preoccupied with the rise of the Lich King's forces, so we are now tasked with this job. He asks us to return to Solliden's farmstead, the land of pumpkins, and assassinate 10 of their warriors. Although we had just arrived here, we realize the importance of this task is serving the Dark Lady, so we turn around and begin our departure. Although this is not the exact turn of events, documenting the war with the Scarlet Crusade is truly its own story, so let us continue this chronicle. At Solliden's farmstead, we are met with very little resistance as we murder Scarlet warriors and any farmer that happens to wander too close to the road. The warriors fall one after another until we reach the great fort that they've begun to reinforce. As we rise up the staircases battling one after another, we reach the top. And with our quota met, we are able to return to the Executor. With one set of forces thinned, Zygand tells us of our next target. The document from Death Knell indicated that Captain Perrine and his brigade has infiltrated a ruined tower southwest of Brill, near the Undercity sewers. Our task is simple. The captain and his bands must be quelled. The walk to the tower leads us past the entrance roads of the Undercity, built underneath the ruins of the once great capital of Lordaeron. We can't help but wonder what resides in the great city, both ruins and new construction alike. As we follow the road, we see the ruined tower in the distance, and arrive to see more than just Scarlet warriors this time around. The land is littered with missionaries wielding holy light and zealots driven by their faith in eradication. We push forward, utilizing the open areas to our advantage, until we reach the captain who keeps guards with him in the ruined tower. However, they are no match for us and our growing dark arts. Another group has been eliminated, and we are able to return to Zygand. He gives us our accolades and passes down the likely praise of the Dark Lady. Immediately, Zygand pulls up the plans from Death Knell and indicates our next target. Directly east of Brill, where the land becomes both mountainous and farmland, exists another ruined tower. This time, a group of zealots choose to raid from this location, coming down through the Balnir farmstead. They are commanded by Captain Vakun. He surrounds himself with friars and more monks that wield the light power meant to incinerate undead flesh. So, we set out east and scale the mountains until we are able to come up behind the unsuspecting crusaders. The friars think themselves clever as they try to heal themselves, but as our magic grows in power, so does our ability to siphon life from them. We make quick work of them all, and then we reach Captain Vakun. The captain and his soldiers stand no match for us, and we clean up their corpses before returning to Brill. Zygand tells us as we return that Varkon's death will be a blow to their forces, but in the same breath he is already bringing up our next and final task. Zygand tells us that there is one more raiding party that is existing here in Tirisfal. In the northernmost part of the land exists one other ruined tower overlooking the coast. There, Captain Melrock and his ruthless crew reside. Zygand says he is entrusting us with this special mission. We are to kill the captain and his 2 personal bodyguards. The journey to the tower is long, and the road is filled with zealots. One by one, we make our way to the fort. The captain and his goons swarm us quite quickly, but through quick thinking and a bit of spell play, we take them all down. A bit bruised and cut up from their swords, we limp our way back to Brill. With this, we have completed the war with the Scarlet Crusade, at least within our current powers and abilities. Zygand tells us that we have done extremely well and that they have a good feeling about us. They even call us comrade, and as we shake his bony hand in thanks, he hands us a ceremonial knife, something to keep on our side for the next time a Scarlet Crusader gets a bit too close. Within Brill, from earlier, we still have a few other quests we needed to turn in. Inside the inn, we meet the innkeeper, who is somewhat thankful for our letter and teaches us how to bind this inn as our home for easy teleportation back. Inside the inn, we can rest, sell items, and train with other well-known warlocks. We do eventually find the apothecary, who thanks us for our delivery of pumpkins. As he takes the pumpkins, we see him turn to his table filled with flasks, tubes, and burners before returning a pumpkin to us. He asks us if we think it looks harmless, which we nod in agreement. Johan tells us if we wish to defeat Arthas' forces, end the human infestation, we need to realize that there is potential in our gift of undeath. He tells us that he has applied his latest formula to this pumpkin, and we are to deliver it to a captured Scarlet Zealot, being kept in the inn's lowest level. Eager to see what was concocted by the apothecary, we find the captured human, who screams and pleads as he sees us approach. That is, until he sees that we hold out food for them. He instantly drops his guard, being thankful for the food, and gobbles it down. At this point, we watch his body slump and fall to the ground, and from it, his corpse rises, transformed into the very thing he despises. It seems Johan has found a way to create our own mindless ones. With this task complete, Johan begins enlisting us with a new set of tasks that they need help with, something he calls a new plague. It turns out Johan works for something called the Royal Apothecary Society, and this society has been tasked by Lady Sylvanas to utilize their knowledge and newfound magic to find the key to Arthas' demise. They are tasked with making a new plague, something that could take down the Scourge's armies. Johan believes the start of this will be from the blood of beasts in the areas of Tirisfal. He requires 5 filled vials of Darkhound blood. So we set out into the fields surrounding Tirisfal. Luckily, before we departed to find these Darkhounds, we were able to find another in need. Inside the inn, a woman by the name of Gretchen Deadmar tells us that the plague of undeath crawls through her veins like an icy serpent. She tells us the mindless state will be upon her soon. But even though she knows she is doomed, she says nothing will prevent her from serving the Dark Lady. Gretchen then goes on a slight anecdote, telling us that when she was first raised, she used to sew body bags for the fallen soldiers of Sylvanas' army, but now her hands shake from the chill. She asks us for a simple set of things: 5 duskbat pelts and 1 set of coarse thread so that she can sew herself a new blanket, just so she can continue serving the cause. Terrified that we all can still lose ourselves to the mindless state and that we can grow even colder, we instantly agree to help Gretchen. Out in the fields, it seems the hounds and the bats leave each other alone, but not when we arrive. Piznik and I send our spells, sometimes grabbing both beasts towards us before eliminating them. Our spells of fire and shadow sometimes burn too much fur or sanguinate a bit too much blood from the hounds before we can grab them for our own vials. But after a bit of time and a few dozen corpses, we have the supplies we need to return back to Brill. Gretchen thanks us as we turn over the pelts, and she says and hopes that Sylvanas will recognize our bravery one day, something we hope in return for her. Johan, on the other hand, instantly sets us up with another errand. He tosses us payment for the Darkhound blood and begins prattling on about how he realized after leaving that he needs more reagents for this experiment, something to help the disease spread properly. To plague the entire world, he says, will be a bit more complicated. He says there are murlocs that are tainted within these lands, and 5 sets of their fins will be enough. He says it matters not if the murlocs are from the northern or the western coasts. Curious to see the ocean, we head north. The murlocs look infected, something we notice as soon as we arrive on the rocky shores. With purple skin and bulging white eyes, we begin our hunting of these murlocs. Some throw spears and others hurl lightning magic, but it seems they've only hunted the humans of this land, never the Forsaken. We make quick work of them and are able to harvest enough usable fins after only a handful of kills. Returning to Johan, we see he has been busy reading this old dusty tomes and texts. Paying us for the scales, he begins telling us of our next errand. He says there was once an ancient plague that wiped out thousands of victims here, it was discovered that the plague was preserved through the venom of the night web spiders here in Tirisfal. Large black and red spiders that exist in the eastern mountains above the eastern farmsteads. Reluctant to see another spider so soon since the mines of Death Knell, we force ourselves to agree and head east. The spiders live amongst the fields and trees, surrounding themselves with other beast creatures like the bats and dark hounds that we've hunted earlier. Finding them hidden near the trees takes a bit of patience, but after a handful of their deaths, we are able to squeeze enough venom from their fangs to meet Johan's request. And as we return, Johan tells us this was the final ingredient, and with its addition, his deadly new agent is ready for testing. Johan says he was speaking to a nearby death guard that says a dwarven mountaineer was recently captured. Johan has added the new plague to a drink and says that the dwarf will be the perfect test subject. As we arrive in the cellar of the tavern, we step over the corpse of the human zealot we poisoned with a pumpkin earlier and hand the drink to the dwarf, who claims it may be no Rhapsody malt, but he'll take anything to wet the old whistle. And as he gulps it down, we hear him gasp in agony and keel over before dying. It seems the plague is both swift and vicious. And with that death, we have completed yet another story here in Tirisfal Glades. Our next main story revolves around the Agamand Mills. But I think before we touch on that, we should cover the remaining mini-stories that we have written down here. As we did our quests within Brill, we had discovered a wanted poster. As in all larger villages such as this, it's quite common for the magistrate of the town to allow a reward for such endeavors. This particular wanted poster spoke of a twisted and undead gnoll known as Maggot-Eye. According to the message, Maggot-Eye has been stealing corpses and selling them for use in the Lich King's army, and has been found holding up at a nearby farm known as Garen's Haunt. With this quest now acquired, we chose to enter the main town's common building to see if the magistrate was in and if any other quests were available. Luckily for us, the magistrate tells us he is looking for someone to find and quell the graverobbers that are plaguing the town. It turns out, when Tirisfal first fell to Arthas's army and the Scourge's plague, there were mass graves dug to accommodate all of those corpses. However, many gnolls, similar to Maggot-Eye, have been stealing these corpses for use within the Scourge's undead army. The magistrate has offered an additional reward for anyone that kills these creatures and acquires any of the graveyard ichor that they are using to raise the dead. 2 similar jobs with twice the pay. Something we couldn't refuse. As we take it upon ourselves to kill these creatures, we wander through the graveyard where we find Junior Apothecary Holland, the man we were meant to deliver Gloomweed to. However, as we begin our delivery, we discover that Gordo misheard Holland. It turns out it was Doomweed that was required. Holland tells us the best place to find such things would be near a mass gravesite. Lucky for us, this would be on the way to Garen's Haunt, so now we are up to 3 jobs for the price of 1. We may be able to afford all of our skills and a comfy place to rest our head at this rate. The gnolls, the graves, and the weeds that we require are quite simple. It seems the gnolls in Tirisfal are somewhat organized, but remain at the same level of stupidity that they do in Elwyn. Killing a few dozen of these creatures and finding the ichors becomes a tedious job, but we complete our work. As we search around the mass graves, we eventually stumble upon the barren farmland known as Garen's Haunt. In the distance, we see a lone farmhouse, and intuition tells us Maggot-Eye will be located there. As we approach, our suspicions are verified. We see not only the creature, but it seems he has surrounded himself with guards. Maybe gnolls are gaining more intelligence. We lure some of the guards away, one by one, before we take out Maggot-Eye, who we were able to face one-on-one. Removing his paw from his body, we begin our trek back to town. The apothecary in the graveyard pays us for the Doomweed and makes a bit of a slip, saying that we helped him and not the Dark Lady. But we pay him no mind. What could a junior apothecary do that is so dangerous? Turning in our paw to Executor Zygon, we gain another praise of thanks for helping the town, and the magistrate thanks us in a similar way, but goes on to tell us that this graveyard ichor will do good for our apothecaries to study. He does mention, though, that there is more to do to help the town. Magistrate Severin tells us of 2 new tasks that we need to do. One is to report to a high-ranking mage in the Undercity known as Bethor, and he says he does not know too much of the details of this quest, but apparently there is a wayward lich that needs recruiting, and it will be dangerous. His other mission is to report to a death guard by the name of Linnea. The magistrate tells us that he must know if more of the Scourge's armies are passing through the eastern bulwark and the vigilance at the border must be maintained. Personally, we do not feel ready to go to the Undercity, so we choose to find Death Guard Linnea. Lucky for us, she isn't stationed too far from Brill. We find her and her allies with their own little fire and tents prepared on the road. Although a short walk from town, we do wonder why one cannot rest in town for this job position. But maybe the Forsaken do value vigilance over commodities. Linnea welcomes us into the fray and understands that Severin wants a report. In short, the bulwark is maintaining and keeps a majority of the Scourge at bay. However, it seems a few have been slipping through the cracks and are colluding at Balnir Farmstead. She hands us this report, but in the same breath, Linnea offers us a job. She asks us to assist the bulwark by entering the farmstead mentioned and quelling the forces that have begun to amass. So, we travel to Balnir's and see that the farm has continued to amass both spirits and bleeding horrors. Lucky for us, spaced out enemies in open areas are now our specialty, and we begin to sling spells and curses at our victims till they fall to our feet. Another job is done, and 2 rewards are gained, both from Linnea and the magistrate. However, we do feel a task lingering, which we have not touched on, which was a putrid task. This task, which was asked of us by Death Guard Dillinger, was asking us to kill mindless ones and collect their hands until we had made a dent in the nearby forces that was under the bridge. A quite simple mission, really, that led us down quite the adventure. After our putrid task was complete, Dillinger asks us if we had ever heard of the Agamand Mills. He tells us that the Scourge have begun trying to form a base at these old mills, and if they do, there will be an increase of attacks in Tirisfal. These orders have been given officially. Destroy the Scourge in the mills. He tells us of various types of Scourge located at the mills and the various body parts he wishes for us to collect. To prove that we had killed them. But before we depart, we walk about the town to find if there are any other jobs that we can complete. Inside the inn, we happen to meet a man by the name of Coleman Farthing. Coleman tells us his tale and the quests he would like us to embark on. Coleman tells us of the Agamand family and all of its members, and how they were the most prosperous family in Tirisfal Glades. It turns out, before the plague, Coleman worked on their mills. He goes on to tell us that when the Scourge first arrived, the Agamands fortified their homes and convinced their employees to remain and help defend, but they were all fools. But loyal fools. In the Agamands' pride, they were all doomed to become minions of undeath and in turn part of the Scourge. Coleman asks us to kill the Agamands who fell to the plague: Nisa, Thurman, Gregor, and Devlin. Devlin, he asks us to specifically pay special attention to, since he was quick to succumb to the plague. A once weak and sharp-tongued boy, his mad chattering can even be heard off the roads leading towards the Agamand Mills. So, we set out. Lucky for us, we arrive at the mills, and we find our powers allow us to quickly take down the swarms of Scourge, and the Agamand family is no match for us. As they all fall to us, we gather their remains and the items of this forming army, and we return to town. Dillinger tells us he will not thank us for what is necessary, but the death guards of Tirisfal will remember our names. Coleman, on the other hand, tells us that his cold heart may finally find warmth, knowing that the Agamands are destroyed. He tells us they failed him, they failed his family, And now he swears he will smash their remains under his heel. He even goes as far to ask if we sensed any free will in them when we killed them. He hopes that they felt fear as they were smashed into oblivion. I understand his contempt. As someone who does not even know how they died, I begin to sympathize with many of the Forsaken and our lives in Undeath. As our conversation dies, Coleman tells us that the work at the mills is not over, and that the magistrate is going to need us. As we arrive back in the town's main building, the magistrate tells us of another task that will help Brill. Severin tells us that there is a reason the Agamand Mills have become so riddled with the scourge. It turns out that there is a local military leader, a skeleton by the name of Captain Dargo, and that he has built his headquarters out of the family's crypts. It turns out he specializes in necromancy and has been raising the Agamand's ancestors to use against us. He tells us that he cannot be allowed to continue this. So, what is our new task? Defeat the raised ancestors and bring their captain's skull back to Brill. As we return to the Agamand Mills, we work our way north until discovering the family crypts, and this is the first time in our journey where we truly discover our fear of the scourge. The crypts are packed with enemies, and it feels like at some points they are just never ending. But by the skin of our teeth, or well, what's left of them, we eventually reach the lowest level of the crypt where we see Captain Dargal. We launch our spells, and then, in his death, we end up removing his skull from his shoulders. The journey home is easier than our journey here, and we find quite the ecstatic magistrate. Severin tells us of our victory and how it will not go unnoticed, not by the Forsaken, nor by our enemies. He even goes as far to say that we will drive the Lich King himself from Azeroth one day. It seems we may be finally making a name for ourselves here on this side of Azeroth. And with that, the Agamand Mills storyline is complete. But we have one more main story to complete. As we check in with our fellow warlocks to go meet Bethor, we gain another quest, specific to our dark arts. We are told to meet with Carindin Halgar. It seems there is some further training that we need to complete, and lucky for us, he resides in the magic quarter of the Undercity. So, we finally have 2 reasons to get to go to the big city. The Undercity, as we arrive, is just decrepit, and yet glorious. With rising elevators positioned behind what was the Great King's throne room, we dive deep into the ground where we are greeted with sewers filled with green waters, areas filled with traders, bankers, and guards. And as we navigate what is essentially a large circle, we meet with our aforementioned tutor. Lucky for us, Halgar tells us not to waste time with small talk and that we should begin focusing on our training. Halgar tells us that we are ready to summon what is known as a Voidwalker, a creature created by the chaos of what lies beyond. But if we cannot control it, we will be torn asunder. We are told the best way to learn this process is by Eglain, the first one to ever summon a Voidwalker. But to our luck, it turns out that his grimoire was stolen by an agent of the Scarlet Crusade. It was taken to a base that we had previously visited, a tower to the west. Before meeting with Bethor, we believe this to be a better use of our time, so we head out to the familiar tower. It seems our attacks on the Scarlet Crusade had only thinned their numbers for only a moment in time, so we worked our way through their ranks again before discovering the chest where the grimoire was located. Oh, how we wished we had noticed it previously, just to save us the hassle. But, alas, we grab the book and return to Halgar. Halgar tells us this will never fall from their hands again, and shows us that this is what we must do to summon our Voidwalker. So he hands us a rune of summoning, and we find the ability, on the markers drawn on the floor, to draw forth an unknown Voidwalker. And with its subjugation, we gain the ability to utilize this spell at any point now in our journey. So, with this spell gained, we find that we are ready to close our final chronicle of Tirisfal Glades. As we see Bethor atop this ziggurat, he greets us as the agent that must have been sent by Severin. He seems wary, but says this business is crucial. Bethor tells us of a lich who dwells on the island of Brightware Lake, to the north. He is a free-willed Forsaken, but he believes all other undead must be scourge slaves, and has had his minions attack all who have approached. But his free will makes him someone the Queen will want, and if he is skilled with necromancy, he will be a great ally. Bethor says the only way to know truly who he is to have his spellbook. So, we are tasked with sneaking into this lich's camp, stealing his spellbook, and then returning. So we set off. The journey is quite uneventful, and luckily for us, the lich seems preoccupied with his own fire and his camp. He does not notice us in the foggy weather of Tirisfal, and we are able to grab his book and sneak back to the Undercity. Bethor is glad to see us return and begins his perusing. We hear him call out in astonishment. It turns out the lich is no other than Gunther Arcanus. It turns out Gunther was a skilled necromancer in his life, and it turns out Bethor and he were comrades in arms well before the plague. So it seems that his power has only grown in undeath. Bethor elaborates more that in life, the two of them, along with the now scourge necromancer Thule Ravenclaw, were friends and students within the Kirin Tor, a society of mages that resides within Dalaran. As Gunther and he fell to the plague, he thought that Gunther either stayed dead or had risen to be part of the Lich King's armies. He makes a point to say that he is glad that he is free, and that we must have him on our side. Bethor hands us the spellbook back and tells us that there is a spell now placed upon it, and that when Gunther sees this, he will know that he too is free of the Lich King, and this is our only hope of him ever joining us. We begin our trek back to the island and approach Gunther. As we arrive, brandishing his own spellbook, he calls us a thief and he grabs it from our hands. He then pauses. Bethor, he is in Lordaeron, he asks. Gunther, both excited and suspicious, goes on to say, although that he wishes to believe that we are free of the Lich King's control, he wants more proof. He tells us of a bloody altar off the southern coast of this island, and that it is being used by a scourge agent, Lilith Nefara. He tells us to grab a candle of beckoning from the crate nearby, summon this agent, and then destroy her. Lilith is not our first scourge agent, we tell him, and we go forth with candle in hand. Lilith comes when beckoned with the candle of flame, and she falls to our spells. With her spirit shattered, we return to Gunther, who says that it is incredible that we have the same freedoms as he. He now wishes to be shown all the others who have broken free of the Lich King's domination. As Gunther finishes his statement, he hands us a nether gem and tells us to return to Bethor. He says it will allow them to communicate and that there is much to tell him. We set forth to the Undercity once again, and we hand the gem to Bethor, who explains what a great deed we have done for the Forsaken. As we stand there, we witness the rekindling of two friends as they begin their first communication since their deaths. With our frozen hearts warmed just a little bit more, we begin to look for our next quest. Being a bit overwhelmed by the big city, we return to Brill, where we happen to check in with Apothecary Johan. Johan looks up from his work, and we can tell by the giant glint in his pale green and gray eyes that he has some type of work for us. Johan tells us that the time is just a luxury not afforded to those working for the Lady Sylvanas, something we know all too well at this point. He tells us, as part of the Royal Apothecary Society, part of his duty is to share his knowledge with any of his colleagues and to further the creation of the new plague, and that information needs to be shared so that they all can continue on this path. He tells us he has finished writing about his findings that we helped him with, and he needs them to be delivered to Apothecary Ren Ferrell. He tells us he is stationed at the Sepulchre in Silverpine Forest. Johan then gives us general direction saying, take the road south leading out of Brill, and from the Undercity go southwest. And with that, we now know our next part of our journey, and that is Silverpine Forest. But before we embark on another journey, we believe we need some rest and some time to chronicleize our thoughts. So for now, I, Tiny Writer, will lay my pen to rest, and we'll see you next time in the Chronicles of the Horde. Hey everyone, just wanted to thank all of you for stopping by this little journey through World of Warcraft Classic and its zones. I know the format this time was a bit different than episode 1, as there are just way more storylines going on. You may have noticed that clearly I was doing more quests alongside one another, but it does make the stories just more disjointed if I tell them exactly how we did them. So I'm curious for your feedback on this current format, but either way, I did want to say it does take me time to both play the game, record, edit, and then write out my scripts. So we'll see how many more zones we chronicleize, but I'm still having fun with this endeavor, so thank you for any time that you've spent on the video. If you do enjoy this, I will always appreciate you liking the video, commenting, and subscribing, as it is the easiest way for me to know that you've enjoyed the content. Thank you again. I've been Matthew.E, and I'll see you soon.